Meeting, and just to remind everyone that we are live streaming to the community who may be watching, and if you could just wait until I announce you before speaking, and request that your mobile devices be turned silent or off, ideally. We have a number of people not present, so we have apologies from Councillor Sherlock, I think, or a leave of absence from Councillor Sherlock, or Deputy Lord Mayor. We have a request for leave of absence that we'll consider later in the agenda from another elected member, and I think that's it for apologies, isn't it? And
Sorry, Lord Mayor. I'm probably going to have to leave early. I just wanted to flag, but we'll still have a quorum, will you?
Yeah.
Yep.
Seven people, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Dudder, I'm not sure whether we've got an apology. Oh, we've got an apology from him too. Okay, no worries. Lovely. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the city on which we're meeting tonight, the Muwinina people who lived in this part of Hobart, Nimbulina, for hundreds of generations, and I'd just like to acknowledge the Tasmanian contemporary Aboriginal community, the Palawa community of Tasmania as well, and acknowledge their elders past and present. The minutes of our last meeting, 22nd of July, would someone like to move those? Has someone been able to look at those? Moved by Councillor Lohberger, seconded by Councillor Kitsos. All those in favour of those minutes, say aye. Aye. Against, say no. Carried unanimously. Transfer of agenda items. Any agenda items?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was hoping to transfer agenda item number 3, the fees and charges for the disclosure of information policy, to the first of the officer reports, so number 10 perhaps.
Moved, seconded by Councillor Posselt. All those in favour of moving that? Aye. And say no. Carried unanimously. Communications from the Chair, I don't have any tonight. Notification of council workshops, just to read into the minutes that we had a workshop on the 29th of July, which was on the Elizabeth Street Vision Plan, Urban Design Guidelines, the Battery Point Walkway and Governance Structure. Then on the 12th of August, there was another workshop where the elected members and staff discussed pedestrian scramble phase trial peer review, the review of strategies and plans, and the model code of conduct changes, and a conciliation briefing. Item 6 is public question time. Have we got any public questions on notice? We have none. And are there any from the floor tonight? There being none. Okay, we'll move on. 6.2 is responses to public questions taken on notice. They're listed in the agenda. Would someone like to move that we receive and note them?
I move.
Moved by Councillor Posselt, seconded by Councillor Lohberger. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. We'll now move on to officer reports. No, petitions. Petitions. Okay, supplementary items. I don't think there are any supplementary items. Item 9 is indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest in any matters listed on the open agenda. There being none, we move on now to officer reports, and we are going straight to the officer report, which is 13, because that's been brought forward. So I'll ask someone to open that item or move the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Posselt. Any discussion? No discussion? Councillor Elliott.
I'd like to move that the motion be deferred, please, so we can consider it next Monday's workshop and come back to the council in September.
Did you want to give any more background as to why? Or?
Yes, it was actually my amendment that asked for these fees associated with this policy to be deferred so that it came back to the council with the accompanying policy, which is what's happened. But it was also expected that this item would be workshopped, and I understand that it was mentioned on Monday night just gone under the broad umbrella of upcoming agenda items, but it wasn't, that wasn't the opportunity in detail to go through the detail of the document. And there's a lot of, which is why it caught me by surprise on the agenda, because I missed the last part of the workshop just gone and it wasn't listed on their workshop agenda. So I think it's really important that we workshop this policy to get it spot on, because just in the look I've had over the weekend, there's a lot of important questions I've got in there. I think it's really important that we hit the nail on the head with this, given there's a lot of reputation building for the council to do around openness of information, RTI in particular, and I would hate for us to put out a policy, especially as I've seen in its current format, because I think it'll be doing it a disservice and actually probably doing us more harm than good.
So it's a deferral motion. I'd need a seconder for that, Alderman Bloomfield. So we'll just vote on that without debate as a procedural motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. No. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Okay, in favour of the deferral, Zuko, Elliott, Hitsos, Lohberger, to everybody else.
And against?
Purcell.
Okie dokie, so that one has been deferred for a workshop. We'll move back to report number 10, which is the Waste Management Strategic Review. Would someone like to move the recommendation, or moved by, Councillor Kitsos, seconded by Councillor Lohberger. Discussion. Would anyone like to discuss this, raise any questions? Councillor Posselt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, a very simple question. I noticed in the report that the countries that are performing the highest with regard to how they manage their waste and not having waste go to landfill, as I recall, Switzerland and Denmark are approaching near 100%, incinerate much of their landfill waste for the purposes of generating power. And I noticed that we didn't respond to that in the report, which is an interesting finding, I think, global to what other people are doing globally. And I was wondering if officers wanted to provide any commentary on why we haven't mentioned incineration, or perhaps we haven't considered it. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about any thoughts they have, and if there's no thoughts, perhaps we could have some.
Mr. Doyle, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. Certainly, when looking at what was happening globally, Councillor Posselt is right. There are a number of countries that claim zero waste to landfill, but he's equally right, much of that is incinerated. We have in our existing waste management strategy an action whereby we consider the potential for waste to energy, and we've looked at it. Happy to look at it again. The issue we have in Tasmania, though, is the relatively low scales or low volumes of waste and the high cost of the conversion of that waste to energy. Our key approach suggested in this paper is actually reducing waste in total, rather than looking to an alternative for large volumes of waste. One of the issues that's been identified in Europe is that waste generation and incineration becomes an industry in itself, and the incentive to actually reduce waste is somewhat lost. We're certainly keen to see the conversion of organic waste, so as that's diverted from landfill, but the thrust that I think we'll be putting to you is to look at how we might reduce waste in total and maximise the diversion of waste, rather than necessarily thinking about waste to energy, but we wouldn't rule it out. There will always be some residual waste. The trick will be to minimise that and then to look at alternatives to putting it into landfill. So I guess it's a long-winded answer, but what we would say is we keep it on the horizon, but it's probably not going to be affordable for the Tasmanian community in the short term.
Question, is it from Alderman Zuko, or comment?
I just want to make a comment. I've Councillor Harvey remembers, I think this came into a report about 12 years ago when we looked at it, if you remember it. So there is a report on the council file somewhere, so you want to have a look at it, and I think that's what it was. It was the cost factors associated with it. So
I think the contract as well. You'd have to sign up.
That's right. Yeah, there was quite a thing. So, you know, if the council officers can get out of the coffers and maybe provide it to Councillor Passot.
Councillor Passot.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, thank you to Mr Doyle for that answer. This is an important matter. It's, you know, one of the 3 R's, isn't it? Roads, rates and rubbish. So it's very heartening to see that we're going to be doing some more work in this space. I would say that I think given we are considering, and the report mentions the idea of solar generation once McRoby's is closed for landfill, that some of the financial metrics may change regarding other waste to energy practices that we could be doing alongside a solar farm generator. So I do think it's worth having a little look at in the modern context. Not 12 years ago. Technology has changed, moved on massively, and we've got a few other things that we can glean from other waste operators around the world. So it would be interesting to have a little more information on that. Other than that, thank you to the officers for preparing the report.
Any further discussion on this item?
I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation. I think it's important that we do start to look at waste in different ways. We've been working with the same strategy for quite a while, so I'm supportive of the recommendations here. But I did want to make a comment about, I think it was a fortnight ago, I went to a plastics forum in Melbourne, and it was interesting, 2 days of talking about plastics with experts from around the world. It was organised by CSIRO, along with RMIT, excellent conference. It started off with the situation with regard to plastics, how serious it is, the amount of plastics we now consume, the amount of different chemicals that are in us. It's in the air, it's in everything we do. You buy a bottle of water, you're drinking plastic straight from the bottle of water. So the pervasiveness of it all is being understood more and more. It's incredibly, pervasive. It's absolutely everywhere. But then the conference got into this phase of techno fixes and how we can make better plastic and how we can deconstruct plastic. And it was all these solutions that weren't part of the top of the hierarchy. And we know the waste hierarchy starts with getting rid of all sorts of plastics. So I was a bit disturbed by how much emphasis was placed on let's do it better, especially from some of the really big companies that think they can solve the plastic problem by creating different plastics. When the evidence at the conference talked about how this is a growing problem, it's going to get far worse into the future. We'll double the amount of plastics that will be in circulation, yet we only recycle a tiny little bit. And one of the documents that I've been influenced by late is a document called The Fraud of Plastic Pollution. The fraud of plastics recycling. And we've seen examples like RedCycle, which was a complete waste of time. Nothing got really recycled from RedCycle other than it all got stored in a warehouse. And they recovered thousands of tonnes out of 1.1 million tonnes put onto the market every year. And now we've got other distractions about single-use plastics. So for me, you know that this has been something I've been passionate about for a long time. So there's been a fraud enacted on society for many generations about do the right thing, that it's our responsibility to look after the world by recycling more, trying harder, increasing education. And while plastics is a very small component of the weight of our waste, it's in sheer numbers, it's billions of pieces that contaminate the entire world now and contaminate all of us. And I'm of the mind now that we need to be more seriously approaching a new way of looking at this and putting the emphasis back on the companies, the oil and petroleum fossil fuel companies that produce the volumes of plastic that we have to deal with as a society. And it mostly falls to local government to deal with this problem. And what I'd like to work out is how into the future we start to send the bill to those companies that produce the problem, because they're encouraging us to do more. They're encouraging local government to spend more money on recovering and recycling. They're not talking about reducing their volumes. they're talking about us playing a harder game to recover more, recycle more, sort better, to invest in technologies that can deconstruct plastics in magical ways. So I just think we're missing an opportunity whenever we talk about waste, is to put the emphasis back on industry, that they need to take responsibility for the pollution that they've created across generations, and stop pushing it onto the consumer to do more, to recycle better, to be more educated. So it's just, I'm not moving any amendments or whatever. I just wanted to emphasise the point that there's been a fraud enacted on society for decades, that plastic waste is our problem that we've created because we recycle badly. It's a problem that should be pushed back towards industry, and at some point local government collectively needs to start sending the bill for managing that back to industry. So across Australia, 530 councils manage a problem that we can't resolve. We can only manage it forever rather than resolve the problem. So at some point in history, we've got to push it back onto industry to say, you have to solve your own problem. It's not for councils to keep subsidising the collection of material, that those industries make the profit and they externalise the cost to local government. So at some point, we have to say that's enough. We can't pay for your problem, for your pollution any longer. So that's just something I'd like people to get into their heads, that at the right point in time we need to push back against industry. Yeah, that's a long 3 minutes, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Councillor Kitsos.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I agree with my my colleague, Councillor Harvey, 100%, but I just wanted to draw the conversation back to what's within our control at the moment, which for me is the new technologies that are available in this waste space and the redesign of the Macrobies waste management facility. So I really welcome this on the agenda tonight. I think it's really important that we go back and look at our strategy and make sure that it does align with what's now available to us in the waste space. I think that with embracing new technologies, we can look at how we're handling our waste and also address some of the community concerns, such as the smell that's sometimes a problem down in the valley there. I would really like to see in this redevelopment of the Waste Management Centre an expansion of the tip shop. I think that this is the resource centre, as it's otherwise known. I think this is a really valued resource in our community for reusing and recycling items. It keeps out a phenomenal amount of waste from landfill each year. Something that I've noted from this centre is that they have a current inability to keep up with the amount of textiles, particularly clothing, that's being delivered to site, and are often just putting it for free out the front of the resource centre because they simply cannot move the amount of things that are being left there, the amount of mostly fast fashion with tags on it, which, you know, is still, until we have the relevant legislation in place to make the producers more accountable for their waste, it is something that we need to find a solution to. So I'd really like to see textiles and clothing dealt with in the redevelopment of the Macrobies waste management facility to feed into that notion of circular economy and reuse. Thank you.
Further discussion? Can I just ask a couple of questions? Just on the fabrics or the textiles, I remember a report came to council, must have been about 18 months ago, about some sort of initiative that we were signing up for to do something with textiles, some collection points. Can anyone recall that? It was probably a previous officer. There was a report to council.
Lord Mayor, it might be one that we take on notice for you and provide some information, but what I could say is, and certainly on Councillor Harvey's point, our approach will be very much based on the waste hierarchy, and avoiding is certainly the key approach. When it comes to textiles, whether it's clothing or in particular mattresses, we do have huge issues And what we would be doing in that regard is taking a regional approach. We've already had some conversations with both Tas Waste, the newly established regional waste authority, and Southern Waste Solutions. Both are looking at exploring options to deal with both clothing, textile, and interestingly, processing of mattresses. So we're very much into seeing how, if we can't avoid the waste, how we can reuse before we start to work down the hierarchy. But we'll come back to you on that particular program, Lord Mayor.
Another question was, I think in our annual planning workshop up in North Hobart, there was a commitment or a plan to include a review of the single-use plastic bylaw in the annual plan. I'm just wondering, is that still on the cards? Ms Edwards.
Hi, through you, Lord Mayor. I don't think we have plans to review that bylaw specifically independently of the normal overall bylaw review, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it was definitely talked about, but and I think Councillor Harvey and I were under the impression that there had been a commitment made to review the plastics implementation of the single-use plastics bylaw. Was that your understanding, Councillor Harvey?
Oh, look, I assumed that there'd be a review at some point. So could we maybe include that in the item here tonight, that we decide on a review date or review process for the plastics bylaw? Something like that?
That's an amendment moved by Councillor Harvey. It would need to be seconded.
I'd already spoken, so I can't move an amendment. Yep.
Okay. Would anyone like to move that amendment who hasn't spoken? No? All right, I'll have to do a different motion, separate motion on that issue. Yeah, because I think it's an important bylaw, but it's one where I think there are some loopholes that I've noticed. And I think we do need to just ensure that it's working as well as it can. But as I mentioned, I think it was definitely identified in our annual plan meeting as it was in the documents, but maybe that's just a plan at this stage. And the other question is just how long is this process going to take? The item 4.3 talks about a report back to council following completion of these actions. How long do you think this process is going to take?
The process has a number of elements, Lord Mayor. We're really keen to prepare a revised strategy and get that out for some stakeholder engagement as soon as we can. I'd like to see a report back to council by the end of the calendar year on that. That strategy will contain within it a number of actions, and some of those will take longer than others. But we're also starting to undertake some planning for the possible redevelopment of Macrobies Gully Waste Management Centre now, and I think it's really important we draw the distinction between the Waste Management Centre as is at Macrobies and will continue on, and the landfill, which we're still considering will close in 2030. So I think, Lord Mayor, a strategy back to you in some way, shape or form by the end of this calendar year, and that will set out a series of actions and timeframes.
And will that be to 2030 or possibly longer than that?
Something we need to consider, Lord Mayor, is the duration of the next strategy. We've certainly learnt from the last strategy, which was 15-year duration. A lot can happen in 15 years, and we find ourselves now having achieved a number of most of the actions in the existing strategy. One of the things that we need to decide is, does our new strategy go to 2030 or beyond? And so that's a part of what we will consider and include in our advice that comes back to you.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 11 is street side dining project evaluation and next steps. There's a recommendation here with 5 points. Would someone like to move the recommendation?
I'd like to move to reject this motion, or to refuse this motion.
Separate
Okay.
motion, I think. I'd need somebody, probably need something
Sure, we've had
in
people
writing.
who...
I'd need a motion in writing probably to outline the reasons for rejecting the motion. We've got, would anyone like to, we don't have a motion in front of us, so I can't do anything without a motion in front of us if someone would like to move it. Otherwise, I just move that, I mean, it's not enough just to say it's be rejected. I'd need a little bit more of a detailed motion.
This is item 11.
Yeah.
Brett Sardone.
Yeah. Well, I'll move the item as recommended by officers.
Seconded by Councillor Kitsos. Would like to, now, Councillor Alderman Bloomfield, sorry, you can speak against this motion.
I have a number of issues with this motion. In fact, I've got a few points for you. One is the way the data has been collated has disturbed me. Similar to the issue I had with a prior data collection for the scramble that went to peer review, I find that we have a similar issue with this one. And there are lots of subtleties here, like in section 9, financial viability, 9.4, you'll find they've done a comparative here where you've got a total of 15,000 required to remove, but hot mix and curbing is 10,000 per site. And the joke is here that they're trying to imply it's 15,000 each to remove and 15,000 and 10,000 each to keep. But in fact, it's 15 for all. There's little things like this which are designed to confuse, which I find is quite poor form and it should not have been put in this format. But in particular, when we look at the actual research itself, and if you go to the actual section that shows, for instance, who were asked, I'm really quite concerned because we have people who use the site, we have people who, businesses that are associated or near the site, and then we have the sites themselves who were surveyed. And what's bizarre is that, 97 people were interviewed who use the site. Now, anyone who's currently actively using an asset or a restaurant or anything else, what are they going to say if we ask, oh, do you like this? Would they be there if they didn't like it? It's like, well, did we actually research anywhere else to find out a more non-biased view? And then in particular, I was quite disturbed to find that, for instance, with the Simple Cider site, that only 2 businesses were actually interviewed there. Am I allowed to know who those businesses that actually answered the survey are? I don't believe we have that in the report, but are we allowed to ask that?
Mr. Noy.
Mr. Holday might have that information.
Through you, Lord Mayor, in line with standard engagement practice, we've actually made all the respondents anonymous because obviously we are cautious that this document is in the public domain.
Okay, so I do have a question then, because in that particular area, only 2 businesses were actually asked. But I'd like to know whether or not Sonic Healthcare was approached, the Makeup Bar was approached, Island Dental was approached, the Guide Dogs and the TAC. And the TAC in particular, when it came to the initial one of the Midtown, I have an email from them and they weren't particularly impressed. Now, I'd like to know whether or not anyone actually approached to see whether or not they were actually happy with what was being additionally installed, because they actually pointed out to me that it actually affected their own users of their facility, and they have a medical facility and all sorts of things there. It actually impacted them. So, I find it quite poor that only 2 businesses were surveyed out of a whole area around that one place, and it was ignored. And then we have the more profound issue around Pilgrim, which is located across from Argyle Street, from the Royal Hobart Hospital. And it's quite concerning because this is where we moved disability parking to put in some coffee shops. And typically, unfortunately, in order to be able to assess or access the Royal, most people are going to either park around or they're going to park in that Argyle Street car park. And they do that because they're ill, or they are time poor because they're trying to visit an ill relative or whatever's happened at the time. So they're time poor. But I noticed that when we used to take my dad, it used to take about 3/4 of an hour to get him into an appointment at the Royal. If we didn't allow for 45 minutes, we couldn't get him there on time. That was 30 minutes to find a spot inside Argyle Street car park and another 15 minutes to wheel him in his wheelchair across. It's significant. And the problem I have is that I've already been approached for a number of months from people who have accessibility issues who've said that they've really found it difficult to get to the Royal now. We had a similar thing yesterday when I had to try and get my daughter to the hospital, to Den, because she hurt herself. Yet again, difficult. We ended up just dropping her off because that was the easiest thing to do for her at the time. And when we look at Argyle Street car park, we actually have a real problem with our occupancy rate because my husband has been checking through the occupancy rates, what's available online, and collating it. He managed to get a full week from Monday to Friday, the 5th to the 9th of August, because other weeks prior had lots of dropouts, so we wanted one that had a full record. And it was 95% capacity for 16 hours and 18 minutes on average. May I have 2 more minutes, please?
Moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Posselt. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously.
So with 95% capacity for 16 hours and 18 minutes, on average that's 3 hours 26 minutes each day, it is actually achieving peak occupancy of 100% on 80% of the days. It's just not good enough. We can't be pushing people to get medical care into a facility that's already been overused. And we can actually quote a Hobart City Council Finance and Government report presented on the 16th of February 21. Now, this is when we were actually looking at taking more parks out to give to the Ronald McDonald House at the time. And a quote from the Hobart City Council: Argyle Street car park currently exhibits an average peak of 87% occupancy. It achieves 100% occupancy between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. on 46% of days, and therefore free car spaces are provided on an already oversubscribed asset. So what has changed? If it was not good enough to be able to do it then, but we're okay removing more parks and doing this now, I find this is in very poor faith. And to finalise, I know that we've actually then kind of said, oh, we'll bring in the report from Midtown. Well, let me quote something from Midtown's actual assessment, the place score assessment. A comprehensive place experience assessment of Elizabeth Street between Melbourne and Brisbane Streets, which tracks changes to community and customer perceptions and captures the social impact of investment. So it was a very broad investigation here. The overall place experience score has increased by 7%, and most of that was due to vegetation. So I don't think we really have the data here to support to continue these at all. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councillor Posselt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, I think it's important to recognise that Elizabeth Street is, objectively a successful, vibrant part of the city with the Midtown precinct upgrades. Go there day and night. There are oodles of people there enjoying the sunshine, enjoying coffee, enjoying alcoholic beverages and each other's company in the evenings. It's a really wonderful place to be, and it was funny going back through the report on the Elizabeth Street precinct, because we've actually upgraded the street furniture and the plantings since that report was compiled, since the place score exercise was done as well. And I noted that it did look a little bit shabby in the report in comparison to what's there now. And what's there now is really quite beautiful. It was more beautiful than what I saw on my trip to Canberra this week for on-street dining, and I think it's been done really well. And I really think you would find people that you would struggle to find people that would say that it's not a success. There's always naysayers out there, but I do think most people see that as a success. Moving on to the 3 proposed sites to extend the trial out to 5 years, which is what we have before us. I do note that Straight Up Cafe on Liverpool Street has substantially more specific responses in the survey data as compared to Pilgrim, the Pilgrim Coffee site and the Simple Cider site. Now, for me, Straight Up seems to be working very well. It's beautiful to look at, it's nice to be in, and it's well used. And from an accessibility perspective, it has gotten on-street dining from the building edge off onto the street, which is what people who have access needs are asking us to do. Pilgrim, on my first assessment, seems a little less successful, and it may be to do with the change in grade that is currently there, but it is not at present as successful, in my view, as Straight Up. And Simple, as far as I can tell, is probably less successful again. But unfortunately for Pilgrim Coffee, we only have 5 people that have given us commentary specific to Pilgrim, and we only have 13 for Simple Cider up on Elizabeth Street. And so I'm a little bit reluctant to approve those 2 sites continuing beyond what they have at the moment for the next 5 years with such a limited data set. I would like to see us get some more data, hear for some more people, potentially some more businesses around some of those areas, but also just higher sample sizes so that we actually get a real snapshot of the community. And so for that reason, but sorry, I am satisfied that Straight Up has an adequate sample size and is working well. So for those reasons, I would seek to move an amendment to point 1 that we utilise and activate all 3 spaces for street-side dining, but remove Simple Cider and Pilgrim Coffee to be put into a point 6, which says that officers will come back to us with a further report pending further data acquisition. I think that we do need a little bit more robust data to make our decision here, especially given that it's a 5-year and reasonably expensive exercise to move ahead with. So I'll move that amendment. I'll test the floor and see if anybody here wants to support that.
Would anyone like to second that amendment? Councillor Bloomfield. I'll put that amendment now, rather than getting, or unless anyone wants to speak to this amendment, just so we don't get muddled up with things. I'll put that amendment then. All those in favour of the amendment say aye. Aye. Say no. 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 Show of hands, all those in favour.
I am showing Passelt, Lohberger, Bloomfield, noes. Kitsos, hang on a second, Kitsos, Kelly, Harvey and the Mayor.
Did you get
Zuko, sorry. Sorry, I didn't see you, Marty, so it's lost.
Further discussion on the recommendation? Councillor Kitsos.
Look, that amendment was tricky for me to decide which way to vote, because I've got some questions around the data, but I love the street side dining, and I think place making has to come first in this scenario, and I feel like we do have overall a really good picture of what's happening with these spaces and feel confident that we can move ahead with what's proposed. I think I'd just like to make the point, though, along the way that a lot of times in this chamber when we're talking about data, we have to be really careful about what it is that we're trying to illustrate with the data and what is it that we set out to do. So while I acknowledge Councillor Passelt's point that it's a very small sample size, and indeed it is, so a sample size is purely the number of people that we've spoken to. But to me, I guess I'd like to see more in the planning of this kind of community engagement around what it is that we're trying to actually ask, and set that out before we go out to the community. So we don't want to be asking the people who are sitting in the sun at the street side dining, do they like it? That's, of course, a really important part of their research, but we actually want to have a model prior to that point that says we'll talk to those people, we will also talk to the businesses, and we will also talk to people perhaps that are not actually located in that area, like in the Cat and Fiddle Arcade, for example, and ask them what they think about street side dining, because otherwise you do really get a really biased cohort, and the anecdotal evidence doesn't reach what we call data saturation in research, and you don't get the themes emerging with 5 people's opinions. So a theme of this kind of nature might be, I like it but I wish it was more accessible, I like it but I wish we had more of them, I like it but, and that's how we actually learn how to improve these facilities for our community. So a more in-depth, I think, qualitative research in this community engagement space would really allow elected members to make a better, well-judged decision rather than just our own personal experiences, perhaps, or the anecdotal experiences of those around us or those that already use the facility. So, as I said, I think it's successful. I think it's a really sensible proposal moving forward. I do think that it improves our livability and our placemaking in our city, but I think more robust data moving forward with these types of community engagements would be putting us in a better position for good decision making.
Discussion?
I've got a couple of questions. The data was challenged, or the low numbers of people participating was challenged. Is engagement voluntary? Are these just people putting forward their own opinion, filling in a survey voluntarily, or are we specifically wandering around trying to find people to fill things in?
Mr Holliday, would you like to respond?
Through you, Lord Mayor, the actual surrounding businesses were with officers visiting businesses to try and get a response and really try to get businesses to fill out the survey, but obviously that's a voluntary exercise. In terms of the general public, that was a self-complete online survey.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm not concerned by the low numbers of data, because if people if they've got an opinion, they'll fill in. I gather that there's an apathy there, that we don't mind. Haven't thought about it. It's normal. We just, use it and that's it. So there's no overwhelming view either way, I don't think. But I'm happy with not having lots of data around it, because I never got any complaints as well. No one called me to complain about these alfresco areas. I've heard nothing bad about them. If anything, the only thing I have noticed is people use them, and I've used them as well. So I don't know. I don't know why we need to seek data about everything all the time, and that could end up costing more in that exercise than the cost of the project. So I'm happy that we don't have a lot of data. I don't mind. I don't need to test the water with every single person in the neighbourhood to find out their view on something. With regard to the car parks, I noticed that there was only 4 car parks removed from one of the sites. 2 of those were paid, 6, and 4 were unmetered. And I'm imagining that if there's 95% occupancy in the Argyle Street car park, that still means there's more than 4 car parks available. And also the evidence, or the report, said that those car parks led to increased usage on street car parks elsewhere, which still had a vacancy rate. So it didn't make any impact taking away these few car parks. So I don't see the urgency of, what's the word I'm looking for? The impact of those 4 car parks not being available for cars, but being available for people. So it doesn't look like that had a big impact. Would that be the case? Through you, to whoever might have an answer.
Mr Holliday.
Mr Holliday.
Comment on that.
The number of car parks that were removed to facilitate these trials didn't have an overall impact on parking in the area, because there was available spaces on the streets and in the multi-stories.
Through you, Lord Mayor, as we indicated in the report, it's our belief, just based on examples elsewhere, we've given an example of Midtown, is that we're seeing displacement of parking activity to other, maybe less utilised parking spaces. Correct.
That didn't have an impact.
That's our understanding.
Any further discussion? Yeah, I might just make a few points. I think I'm happy to proceed with these proposals. This did come to workshop and elected members did have some input, and a key issue for several elected members was this was a user pay system, and the staff listened to that feedback and have adjusted the cost to the businesses to have this facility. I think this is a pro-business initiative. Lots of businesses that I speak to are really keen to have more space for outdoor dining. It's not going to work everywhere, but I think I'm really keen to see item 5 progress as quickly as possible. That we actually have some guidelines for and clarity for businesses about how much it costs, what they need to do, how long it's going to take, how long they can have it for, what safety considerations have to be put in place, because it's every few weeks there's a business that will ask me, I've seen this particular initiative, think it'd be really great outside my business, what do I need to do, what will it cost? So I think the sooner that we can actually develop a set of guidelines that we can be transparent with people about, the better. This kind of installation, I think one of the reasons why it didn't generate a lot of commentary is because this is now so common in almost every regional and capital city around the country that it's pretty unremarkable that particularly in places that have got limited and narrow Georgian streets like we do, but any sort of historic town with limited road space and limited footpath space, there is this use of parking spaces to create some extra outdoor dining. Again, it's not removing all parking spaces in a street, but it is tactically providing this opportunity for businesses that want to pay for it. So I think it's very much about Hobart just keeping up with what is now a facility that's quite unremarkable in most cities of Australia. But it's even more important in our city because we have those very narrow footpaths. So the opportunity for businesses to expand and to have more opportunity are limited. I do appreciate Alderman Bloomfield's concerns about patient access to the hospital, but I don't think that we should muddle up what is a pretty important strategic issue for the hospital, for the health department, with a fairly small number of outdoor dining opportunities most of which are nowhere near the hospital. But yeah, I mean, I think we all want to see Argyle Street's hours extended. I've recently learnt about the patient transport service, that people can get free transport services to be dropped off at hospital. So I think there's a whole range of services available that people aren't aware of, and I wouldn't like to see us making a decision about this policy sort of, in some ways drawing a bit of a long bow about issues around the hospital and access to the hospital. So for all of those reasons, I'm supportive because the businesses are paying for this. I think it's a pro-business policy, and very keen to get that broader guidance developed as soon as possible for other businesses that might be interested in doing this. Okay.
Excuse me, Lord Mayor, can I just ask a question if I could? Yeah, through you to Mr Holliday. In the event of Simple Cider either rejecting or not obtaining an occupancy permit, and any of the other properties there who say they don't want to proceed with that, what will be the process to invite other people or consider replacements of those venues?
Through you, Lord Mayor, if a participating business declines for whatever reason, and obviously we do have that occupation consideration for Simple Cider, then we would remove the existing infrastructure and we would cease provision in those locations. I think it's our preference at the moment to come back to Council with a coherent set of guidelines and a policy and a program so we can invite other businesses to participate as part of an ongoing program of council.
Thank you for that response. Look, I'm all for outdoor dining. This has been a trial. It's failed in some areas. I'm concerned about the. I think the consultation could have perhaps been done a bit better. Let's not forget we're losing $88,000 in parking revenue from that. I think that's. Yeah, look, there's a bit of give and take here, I guess, but it is significant. I do get a bit peeved too that people saying that, oh, look, there's a car park, there's a multi-storey car park and that. It's really two different forms of parking. People who want that curbside parking are people who want to go in and out, and we all know how long sometimes it can take to get in and out of the multi-storey car park. So it's really probably a bit oversimplified, I think, this whole notion of how it's going to work out and be done there. But look, I'm going to put some faith in the coming report, and I would hope that, particularly with the further report, to establish an ongoing site dining program, on-site dining program, not take too long, because there's a lot of businesses, as we know, who do want to support this, and it'd be a shame to see it flounder too much longer. So yeah, in light of that, there's good faith with the way it's going to be handled, this, and it's done expeditiously. I will support what I see here tonight. Thank you.
Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no.
No.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
I'm showing Kitsos, Lohberger, Kelly, Harvey and the Mayor.
And against?
Luco, Passelt, Bloomfield.
That's carried. Move on now to item 12, which is the school access travel plans. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Lohberger, seconded by Councillor Passelt. Discussion? Discussion on these, Councillor Lohberger?
I just had a question, Lord Mayor. It's been a while now since we approved a building at Gregson Avenue, just up the road from Newtown Primary School, and there was a pathway going through that site. It was a Homes Tasmania application right next to St John's Park. Now that approval will cruel that pathway. It's going to remove it effectively. I was just wondering if we've done any work on an alternate pathway there, because an awful lot of kids for the primary school use it, so I think possibly it's a relevant question in this particular matter. So I guess through you, have we done any work on redirecting the existing pathway that goes through 3 Gregson Avenue to the back of Newtown Primary?
I don't know. Mr Vidal, do you know anything about this?
Yeah, through you, Lord Mayor. Not that I'm aware of, certainly not in my time, but we'll take that one on notice.
I haven't started construction yet.
Yeah, it's a really valid question, so certainly happy to explore that further. And
thank you.
Further discussion, Councillor Passelt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to the team for preparing the school access travel plans for Newtown Primary, for South Hobart Primary and for Goulburn Street Primary School. School access travel plans are all about encouraging kids to walk to school, to ride the bikes, to scoot and to take the bus, ways where you get more incidental exercise and promoting a healthy lifestyle from our young children. And we know that transport decisions in young children lead to transport decisions when they're adults. Those who ride their bike to school are more likely to ride their bike to work. Those who get a car and get dropped off to school are more likely to be single occupancy vehicle drivers. Interestingly, since we started this process, because some of this has been quite protracted, COVID got in the way, I think, and we've had some changes to our strategic documents. And so while I applaud the actions for what we seek to do in these plans, because we've strengthened some strategic documents that sit above these school access travel plans, I think that it empowers officers to go one step further. It empowers officers to seek money in capital works. It empowers officers to not just talk about islands, as I suggested in the school access travel plans, but to talk about wombat crossings and things that really prioritise the safety of children. And I'll draw you to the changes in those strategic documents that have occurred since we started this process. So in our highest level document in the strategic plan, just last year, 5.1.8 was inserted, which was that we consider children and family needs in city mobility planning. 7.3.6 was also inserted that said we would consider the needs of children and families in all infrastructure design. And then just last month in the transport strategy, an amendment was made to add Action 30, which was to support children's active travel to school with a focus on safety through the development of school active travel plans. Now, I think that the officers should listen to those higher level documents and lift what we have here tonight in front of us, and I hope to see them do that independently. All of the authority that they need, we can give them tonight to do that. But I do want to see safety prioritised around schools, and I do desperately want to see more wombat crossings, less pedestrian islands, and intersections that are problematic, such as the Darcy Street intersection, fixed, not with simple paint on road. That's not good enough. We have talked about Darcy Street for more than a decade. It is time to invest money, capital works money, to actually redesign it and fix the intersection. This plan suggests paint. I would suggest that we go one step further than that, and I think that we have done that in our higher level documents. But I do applaud the concept, and I look forward to seeing the next tranche of school access travel plans rolled out faster and more efficiently, because we will have learnt from these. And I think it's really exciting because it's not criticism on the officers. It's saying to the officers, you know what, you've done a good job, but let's actually go further. Let's actually deliver things that are in the spirit of our strategic documents. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I'm going to just flag this, and I'll start voting against matters unless I actually, when I read a report, can actually read the financial aspects of it. I don't think going through the funding sources and whether or not it's approved or not approved in the budget, I'd like to know the bottom line. Once upon a time in our financial reports, we used to have what it was going to cost, what it wasn't going to cost, and everything. You know, I don't think we need to be going back to the budget every moment we get a report. We used to get those reports in committees and on council agendas. So I'm just flagging it. I'm going to support this tonight. There's a couple of other items that are similar, and I will simply vote against matters unless I see in the report that I'm approving how much money we're spending on the project and what the future budgets are going to cost and everything. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councillor Kitsos.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I take on board what Councillor Alderman Zuko has just said about budgetary requirements, and I think I would like to strengthen the words in point 2 tonight and move an amendment. I guess a bit of background to that amendment is that these are really, really important travel plans. They're the future of how we need to look at our suburbs and our schools and our infrastructure to support active transport, but to also promote the safety of our children and our families around these hubs of activity that are not only busy during peak times, during the 9 and 3 drop-off and pick-up, but also are hubs of community for outside activities in the evening and sporting activities on the weekend. So, you know, while crossing guards are essential and so well received, and I thank all the crossing guards out there, they're not available to the communities on weekends and outside of hours, and I think we need to be conscious of that with our capital works program in these active transport plans that we're making these spaces safe at all times for the community. So because these plans have been delayed due to COVID and other confounding factors, I'd like to change the wording from considered to implement in point 2, just by way of encouraging these priorities to be funded in the next annual budget and implemented before they do become out of date. I don't want to be seeing these sitting unactioned any longer. I think coming up on 5 years is becomes unacceptable. We need to action these things. And I'd like to add an additional point to the amendment which just draws attention to safety, that further work be undertaken to investigate formalised crossings at strategic locations in these school active travel plans. So, as Councillor Posselt said, a bit more than paint on the road. I think we need to make sure that everyone feels safe accessing schools and that parents feel safe letting their children access schools through a variety of active travel networks, keeping in mind that this also may be dropping children off further up the road from the school so that we don't get those kind of bottlenecks around school areas, so that they can simply cross at a safe point and access the school on their own. So I would like to add that point in there so that we can give the officers some power to go back and have a look at these first 3 schools as our pilot schools and make sure that we do have some formalised crossings in these plans.
Thanks, Councillor Kitsos. I think you circulated those amendments to elected members, but if you could forward that to Mr. Noy. Oh, you have. Great. Lovely. Okay, so there needs to be a seconder for Councillor Kitsos's amendments. Is there a seconder?
Do we need to amend, or can we just accept that into the recommendation? Pretty similar. They're not different.
Lord Mayor, this is an officer report, needs an amendment. It's not a motion from an elected member.
I don't think the meeting regulations distinguish between the two, but I guess we've generally, for something probably with this much, you probably would vote on it as an amendment, I would think. But needs a seconder for it to proceed, to be voted on, otherwise it will lapse. I'm happy to second it if someone wants to take the chair momentarily.
Lord Mayor. Okay, Lord Mayor, you have an amendment.
I didn't get the email.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay, we will vote on the amendment.
Could I just hear the
Any
amendment,
discussion?
please?
Sorry. The amendment is Councillor Kitsos.
So point 2 is to change the word considered to implement. And an additional point, which would be point 4, that further work be undertaken to investigate formalised crossings at strategic locations in school active travel plans.
Okay, thank you. It's on the board. It's on the board as well now. Councillor Bloomfield.
Whilst I very much appreciate how important this is, and I truly do, I have concerns in the fact that we're effectively allowing the writing of a blank cheque. We don't know how far wide this scope will go. We don't know the cost, which is something that Alderman Zuko had already highlighted. And that's why I believe it was used the words considered rather than to implement, because we already know we have a fairly tight budget and we have, 72 items on the list to negotiate and move around for capital works. So I would very much appreciate that if we want to go ahead, we really need to know more before we do it. And honestly, I'd be the first one to push it through. But I honestly feel that it would be inappropriate to simply push it now with no financial consideration at this point.
Chair, through you, I don't think the word makes any difference, considered or implemented. It's still going to go through the budget process. And if it's not prioritised within the budget process, it doesn't matter whether it's considered or implemented. Would that be through you to the Director?
Acting CEO. Yeah, I mean, that's correct. It does have to go through a budgetary process. So ultimately, these projects need to be scoped up.
And they'll all be considered anyway.
Yes.
As opposed to implemented. We consider it before we implement it. And what was the fourth bit?
Stronger message.
Yep. Look, I'm happy to support that bit. It's up there. Behind me. Further work be undertaken to investigate form. Well, further work. I'm happy for further work to. Well, further work's not going to cost us a lot of money. We'll be working in the area on various things as we're considering projects related to this, either considering it or implementing it. We'll also be able to investigate. Anyway, it's all just, I don't know if it makes any difference, but anyway, I'm happy to support the amendment. Like, I can't be more positive than how it works through the budgetary process. So it may or may not occur anyway, you know?
Can I just wanted to say, look, I think if
that wasn't a question.
Can I amend my amendment?
You've already spoken to your amendment.
Okay.
Sorry.
You can sum up. No, you can't sum up.
Any other discussion on the amendment?
I just wanted to speak briefly, Chair, just about the fact that I find myself at Campbell Street Primary School on Saturday mornings at the moment, and there are hundreds and hundreds of children there and no crossing guard. There is an awful lot of sport played at these schools outside of the hours of the crossing guards, and I really particularly wanted to provide support to point 4. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask another question to you, Chair?
Absolutely.
With regard to crossing guards, are they officially appointed by the school, special people that get the gear, or can parents have the same sort of gear and do the same sort of job, helping people to cross the road?
Mr Vidal.
Novel question, but no, so certainly it's regulated by the state government, so the school crossing guards is a state government responsibility. They manage all that process, so but that's all done in conjunction with the schools. But yes, certainly Department of Education in that sense.
And what's the penalty for an unauthorised parent helping students cross the road? It seems a bit nonsensical.
It's pretty high.
Officers, I have to take that on notice, I think. Councillor Basalt.
Thank you, Alderman Zuko. I've just raised my feet to say that I support with gusto anything that enhances the safety of children around schools. That's it. We should be doing more. We have to do more. As Councillor Lohberger points out, Campbell Street Primary is packed on the weekends. Equally, Lansdowne Primary is, because it's also a weekend sporting facility, and we're not doing enough to consider that activities occur in schools outside of school hours, and that school crossing guards are simply not sufficient. We must do more, and our documents allow officers to do more, so let's get it done.
Anyone else? I think no. I'd just like to make a very brief point. I consider that there is a difference between implement and consider. To my point of view, the word implement means we're going to actually do something. It hasn't been considered in the budget, so I'm sorry, I can't support the word implement when we haven't got any budgetary. We don't know what the cost is going to be, and it's all part of the budget. And I think if it's going to go through the budget system, what's the difference? We leave it as it is. So sorry, I cannot support the word implement. I think it's very, very specific. I'll put the motion. I'll put the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment?
Aye.
All those against? No. Show of hands, please.
In favour, I'm showing Passelt, Kitsos, Lohberger, Councillor Kelly's got his hand up, Harvey and, the Lord Mayor.
Those against?
Bloomfield and Zuko.
So now that's been amended, I'll put the motion as amended. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Okay, Purcell, Kitsos, Lohberger, Bloomfield, Kelly, Harvey and the Mayor.
Against?
Against Alderman Zuko.
Okay, moving on now to item 14, procurement quotation exemption report.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Lohberger. Any discussion on this item? No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 15 is the Local Government Association of Tasmania, and it's the motions that will be before the September general meeting. There's recommendation on the 5 motions.
I'll move the recommendation.
Could they be all moved separately, please?
Sure. Any discussion on... Oh, sorry, moved by Councillor Harvey.
Well, they're going to be... Okay, yeah. I'll move all of them for officer's recommendation, and then we'll take them one at a time.
Okay. Seconder, Councillor Lohberger. Discussion?
On the first one?
On any of them. But I'll put them all separately to vote. Councillor Posselt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Very briefly, there's one item in here that officers have recommended that we do not support, which is around the definition of the substantial commencement of work. And having a brief chat to our director this evening, it doesn't come up too frequently that the definition of substantial commencement of work on a DA is brought before council or before TASCAT for a decision, and that's led to some greyness in the law about the definition of what substantial commencement of work means. And we did have a DA last year where it was deemed that they had not substantially commenced work. The reason I rise is I agree with the recommendation here that we don't support this because it would be too ad hoc with 20-something councils having their own definitions of substantially commenced work. However, I do think that we need to do some work in this space to assist developers to understand what our position or our interpretation of the law is, bearing in mind that that is subject to their own legal advice. So I guess just putting some commentary and some context that I support the kind of rationale why they think they need to bring this to us from Circular Head Council, but they're not quite going about it the right way. But I do think that we can do some work in this space to improve clarity for developers, and developers want clarity and certainty, that's for sure.
Further discussion? Further discussion? So Alderman Zuko, did you want to speak or you just want to vote?
No.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to put the item first, item number 1, to vote in favour of the motion from Burnie City Council. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 2, in favour of the motion tabled by Devonport City Council. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 3, in favour of the motion tabled by Georgetown Council. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 4, vote against the motion by Circular Head Council. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. And item 5, vote in favour of the motion tabled by Central Coast Council. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously.
We're not talking about litter bugs though on that one, are we? We're just talking about the animal.
Yes.
Okay, moving on now to item 16, which is responses to questions without notice. Would someone like to move all of those? Moved by Councillor Posselt, seconded by Alderman Bloomfield. All those in favour say aye.
I suppose. I actually moved it.
Oh, Councillor Lohberger, sorry. Councillor Lohberger, seconded by Alderman Bloomfield.
But yes, aye.
All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Yes. Item 17 is questions without notice. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to put? Councillor Lobo?
Actually, no, I'll save it for planning. That's okay.
Any other questions?
A question on procedure. Do we need to receive a note to questions taken on notice during debate?
That's next.
That's next.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is just if you've got any questions. There being none, we'll move on to item 18, questions taken on notice during debate. There's a register. Could someone like to move those? Be received and noted.
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Alderman Bloomfield. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. That brings us to the closed portion of our meeting. Would someone like to move us into the closed?
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Posselt. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously.